The oranges were still warm when I placed them in the brown paper bag. I had picked them that morning from the tree I planted nearly 20 years ago, back when Avery still called me Mama and believed my love could fix anything. I had no expectations, just a hope, foolish perhaps, that she'd smile when she saw me. Maybe even let me in. Her home stood like a monument on a quiet cul-de-sac in the hills outside Los Angeles. It had the kind of gate that buzzed before it opened, the kind that didn't welcome surprises, but it let me in. I walked slowly up the driveway, my shoes crunching on polished stone, clutching the bag like a peace offering. When I rang the bell, I straightened my cardigan, checked my breath, and waited. The door opened. I froze. Avery Langley stood before me, but she looked like someone I had never met. Her face was flawless, makeup sharp and cold. She wore a white blazer, not a wrinkle in sight, and heels that had never touched unpaved ground. Her eyes, my eyes, flashed with something quick and sharp. Not warmth, not confusion, something closer to fear. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, glancing behind her. I was in town," I said, lifting the bag. "I brought oranges."
She didn't look at them.
She looked through me. "You can't be here," she said, voice lower now. "Not today." "I didn't know you had company," I offered, still trying, still hoping. She stepped forward, closing the door behind her slightly. "The press is inside. Investors, people who believe I grew up without a mother." I blinked. "What?" "They think you died when I was 6, she said, like she was reporting the weather. "It's cleaner. The story works." I stared at her. My daughter, the girl I worked night shifts for, who I carried on my hip during bus transfers, who once sobbed into my shirt over a scraped knee, had erased me. "You're not part of my story anymore," she added. "You're a liability." I don't remember what I said next. I think I said her name. "I know." She raised her hand, not to hit me, just to end the moment. She pushed me hard. My back struck the steps. The bag tore. Oranges spilled down the path, rolling into the street, their skins cracking open. I heard her voice from inside the house again. Already light, already charming. I stayed there for a while, not because I couldn't get up, but because something inside me had just broken in a way that couldn't be stitched. And for the first time, I realized Avery Langley was no longer my daughter. She had become someone else, and I had just met her for the first time. I didn't knock again. I gathered what remained of the torn paper bag, left the oranges where they lay, and walked down the hill without looking back. But something pulled me to the corner across the street. I stood behind a hedge, tucked into the shadows where I could see the front door again. It opened.
Chew.
Avery stepped out, smiling. The kind of smile she used to practice in the mirror as a teenager when she dreamed of being on television. And then she wasn't alone. An older woman appeared beside her, gentle-looking with pearl earrings and white hair pulled into a neat bun. She wore a soft pink shawl and walked with a grace that reminded me of a kindergarten teacher or a retired librarian, the kind of woman who never raised her voice, who baked cookies from scratch. "This," Avery said to the group of reporters inside, "is my mother." The woman gave a small wave, a modest smile, then stepped forward and took Avery's hand. "She raised me alone," Avery continued, her voice thick with emotion. "She worked 3 jobs to get me through school. She never gave up on me, not once. She sold her wedding ring to buy my ticket to Stanford." The cameras clicked. Someone gasped. I watched as Avery leaned her head on this woman's shoulder, then pulled her close for a perfect photo. That was my story. I was the one who cleaned hospital bathrooms, who borrowed money to buy used textbooks, who skipped meals to make sure she never missed lunch. I had the cracked hands, the backaches, the secondhand sweaters, and the overdue electric bills. And now that woman, whoever she was, stood in my place, delivering my lines like a seasoned actress. She looked so convincing, too. Her voice trembled in just the right places. "I always believed in her," she said to a journalist, wiping away a tear. "Even when the world didn't." I could almost believe her myself. I pressed a hand against my chest. It ached, not from the fall, but from something deeper. Something that felt like being buried alive under the weight of someone else's success. Someone else's memory of me rewritten and cast aside. I turned away. That day, something inside me shifted. Not anger, not even grief, something colder, quieter, a decision. If Avery wanted a world where I no longer existed, she would have to live in it. But not without the truth trailing her heels, waiting patiently in the dark.
I didn't sleep much after that day.
My body ached in ways I couldn't name. Not just in joints and bruises, but in places that used to hold pride. For weeks, I said nothing. But silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes it means you're listening. And I was listening for a way to uncover the truth. That's when I found Frank Dorsey. He used to work for the state as a fraud investigator. Now retired, he took private work, quiet, thorough, no drama. He didn't ask why I wanted to know everything about the woman who stood on stage pretending to be me. He just nodded when I handed him a photo from the newspaper and said, "Find her." 3 days later, he returned with a file. Her name wasn't Joanna Hale, as Avery had claimed. It was Lucinda Gray, but that wasn't real either. Her birth name, Deborah and Kilroy, 5 aliases in 20 years. 3 bankruptcies, no record of adoption, no foster care credentials, no biological children listed anywhere until he found one. A son named Levy, Frank said, died at age 9 in a group home. Asthma, no treatment. I couldn't breathe for a moment. Lucinda or Deborah had lived a hard life, a quiet one. She'd once worked as a statue performer at a theme park in San Bernardino, dressed in silver paint, standing still for hours while tourists dropped coins into a jar. That's who Avery had brought into the spotlight, a woman who knew how to disappear in plain sight. Frank's last photo showed Lucinda backstage at a fundraising gala, makeup half-finished, slouched in a green room chair. Her eyes met the mirror, but there was nothing behind them. No pride, no spark, just emptiness. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't just pretending. She wanted to believe it, too.
She wanted to be me.
I asked Frank to find her. "I need to talk to her," I said. He nodded again. 3 days later, we met at a quiet cafe near the edge of Pasadena. She wore a cardigan over a wrinkled blouse. Her hands shook slightly as she sipped her iced tea. She saw me and didn't flinch. "You're her real mother," she said. There was no act, just a tired truth between 2 women who had both lost something they could never get back. When I got home from that cafe, I went straight to the back bedroom. The floor creaked beneath my feet as I knelt and pulled out the old metal tin from beneath the bed. It was scratched, dented at the corner. Once a cookie box from the night shift vending machine, but for years it had held the only things I couldn't afford to forget. Inside was the paper trail of my motherhood. The first thing I found was a letter Avery wrote on the night she got into Harvard. Her handwriting was rushed, ink smeared where her hand had dragged across the page.
"Mom," it began.
I got in. I got in. I don't know how to say thank you. Without you, I'd be dead or worse. You never let me fall. Not once. Beneath it was a worn shirt, my old hospital uniform. The collar was torn, the bleach stains permanent. It still smelled faintly of floor wax and fatigue. I had worn it the night she was hospitalized for pneumonia. I never changed. I slept in that chair for 3 nights. At the bottom was a folded sheet of wide-ruled notebook paper taped down the center. A poem from 5th grade. Mom is the mountain. I am the tree. If she falls down, what happens to me? I laid them out on the kitchen table and began taking photos. No filters, no adjustments, just raw images of cloth, crayon, ink, and love. I scanned the letter. I took a close-up of the stitch name tag on my work shirt. I framed the poem under the yellow glow of the kitchen bulb. Then I opened my laptop. On Avery's Foundation website, there was a list of sponsors, dozens of companies who'd built their marketing campaigns around her origin story. Stories of resilience, of maternal loss, of healing from nothing. I wrote each one a short message, attached the images, labeled the files clearly, and at the bottom of each email, I added one line. If you're investing in a story about a mother's death, I thought you should at least know she's still alive. I hit send one by one, 37 messages in total. Then I sat back in my chair. I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't chasing fame. I wasn't even looking for revenge. I just wanted someone, anyone, to see that I existed, that I mattered. By morning, I had my answer. A tweet went viral from an anonymous account. The dead mother is alive, and she kept everything. It included the poem, the letter, a photo of the oranges on the sidewalk. Within 12 hours, Reddit threads exploded. Podcasts picked it up. Commentators dissected every word. And then the video surfaced. Doorbell cam footage from the house across the street. It showed everything. Avery opening the door. Avery shoving me. Avery stepping over my body to close the door behind her. And the internet, for once, chose to care. The fallout was fast and brutal. By the end of the week, Avery's company lost over 60% of its market value. 3 major sponsors cut ties within 48 hours. A luxury wellness brand pulled all inventory with her face on the label. Her book was pulled from shelves. Retreats canceled. Podcasts removed past episodes. Her name became a cautionary tale. And still, Avery said nothing. No apology, no clarification, no acknowledgement that the woman lying on the pavement had once sewn her school uniforms by hand. Instead, she vanished from public view. No statements, no interviews. But Lucinda Gray didn't disappear quietly. Her name made headlines next. Mother figure at center of scandal vanishes with $5 million in charity funds. Investigators traced a series of overnight wire transfers to offshore accounts. The Healing from Nothing Scholarship Foundation was drained. The address listed as her residence was vacant. No activity on her phone. No paper trail since the morning after the doorbell footage aired. And then the truth unraveled. Lucinda Gray wasn't just a woman with a tragic past. She was a seasoned impersonator. Her real name, Deborah Ann Kilroy, had appeared in 3 other miracle reunion campaigns tied to other CEOs and public figures. Each time, she played the grieving, long-lost mother. Each time, she vanished once the donations poured in. It wasn't a scam of money. It was a scam of memory. She knew how to weaponize nostalgia. She knew the power of a mother's story. And she sold it to the highest bidder. Avery had bought it willingly. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt quiet, like the house after guests leave. Like the hush after the final door closes. A week later, I received a torn envelope. No return address. Inside was a single piece of hotel stationery. Deborah's handwriting was shaky. I was never her mother. I never wanted to be. I just wanted to feel once what it meant to be someone's reason for healing. I don't expect forgiveness. But if I ever had a daughter, I wish she had been like you. There was no signature, only a postscript. You were never the ghost in the story. You were the anchor. And anchors don't beg to be seen. They just hold. The phone rang at 3:17 a.m. At my age, sleep comes in patches. I was already awake, sitting by the window with a blanket over my knees and a book I wasn't really reading. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew who it was.
Mom.
Her voice was small, hollow. A child's voice, not a CEO's. Not the woman who built a brand on my absence.
I know it's late, she said.
I know I don't deserve to call, but I didn't know who else to reach out to. I said nothing. I'm being sued, she continued. The board's pulling out. The IRS is freezing everything. They're saying I have to pay damages or I'll lose everything. Another pause. Mom, they said, you have money. I stared at the tree outside. The one I had planted the night she pushed me from a seed in a split orange. It was taller now, its branches casting long shadows across my lawn. Avery was right. I did have money. Back in 1995, I bought a plot of land along the coast. Cheap because no one saw potential in it.
Too rocky, too far. But I saw what it could be.
I planted citrus trees, sold pieces off slowly, invested in trusts under a different name, not to hide but to survive. That land was now worth over $1.3 million. She knew that. Or someone told her. Please, she said, help me fix this. I'll make it right. I'll bring you into the company. I'll say the truth. Still, I said nothing. Then came the word that broke something in me. Mother. Not mom. Not ma. Just mother. Cold.
Distant.
like a title on a line she barely wanted to say. I closed my eyes. "Do you remember the day I brought the oranges?" I asked. Silence. "When you opened the door and shoved me." Her voice cracked. "Yes, that day," I said softly, "when you closed the door on your mother. Only one other door opened." She exhaled, shaky. "The door to hell." I nodded, even though she couldn't see. "And I will not open another one for you." I hung up. Then I placed the phone on the table, turned off the light, and for the first time in years, I slept. Not because I was at peace, but because I was finally free from waiting, free from the hope that she would ever see me again as her mother. And that freedom was more restful than forgiveness could ever be. Mornings came slower after that. I no longer rushed to check headlines or messages. There were no more anonymous emails, no more viral threads. The world had moved on from the scandal as it always does. But I hadn't moved on. I had returned to something quiet, to something true. Every morning at 6 o'clock, I stepped into the backyard and checked the soil beneath my orange tree. The one that grew from a single seed I picked up after the fall, the seed from a broken piece of fruit she had knocked from my hands. It had taken root in the darkest season of my life, and still it grew. Some days I would pick one orange and place it on the windowsill. Sometimes I'd eat it, sometimes I'd give it away. Nora Whitman, the little girl next door, often came by on her bicycle. She had skinned knees and a sunflower t-shirt and the kind of laugh that bursts sideways when she tries to hold it in.
She called me Granny BIA.
She didn't know the full story.
She didn't need to.
All she knew was that I always had fruit, and I always shared. One afternoon, as I peeled an orange for her at the table, she said, "I wish you were my real grandma." I smiled, not from sorrow, but from something deeper. "Maybe I am," I said, handing her a slice. Sometimes the sweetest things come from the smallest seeds. In the evenings, I wrote letters I never sent. I folded old linens, read books on gardening, and tucked articles into a scrapbook labeled Someday. Some might say it was a small life, but to me it was sacred because it was real. No stage, no audience, no tears sold in hardcover editions. Just me, just breath, just the slow, beautiful business of continuing. Occasionally, I'd catch glimpses of Avery in a headline on a board of directors for a new startup. A whispered line in a podcast about redemption. The photos always looked softer. Her hair was shorter now, less polished. She didn't smile like she used to. Some said she was rebuilding. Others said she was ruined. I didn't say anything at all because she was no longer mine to explain. I didn't attend her court hearings. I didn't watch the documentaries. I didn't write a memoir or grant interviews even when the offers came in. Because this was never about revenge. It was about memory, about roots. The kind they try to erase. The kind they call inconvenient. The kind that hold fast even when the branches forget where they came from. I sat beneath the tree often, watched as shadows stretched across the yard, watched as the wind moved through the leaves, and I knew without needing the world to validate it. I was still here, living, breathing, growing. Not for an audience, not for applause, but because that's what mothers do. We endure. Even when we're forgotten, even when we're replaced, even when we're declared dead, we still grow. And sometimes, from the smallest seed of truth, something stronger takes root. Something no one, not even our children, can take away. It's been 2 years. 2 years since the headlines, since the silence, since the phone call in the dark. 2 years since I shut the door. Not just on her, but on the version of myself that waited to be welcomed back into a story I was never meant to finish. Life didn't go on. It returned. Some mornings I rise before dawn, not because I can't sleep, but because I want to greet the stillness. I step barefoot into the backyard and run my fingers along the bark of the orange tree. Its trunk is thicker now, stronger. Its branches reach over the fence line, bearing fruit even after long winters. It reminds me of something I once read, that growth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers underground for years before blooming. Inside the house, I've kept one framed document. Not an award, not a headline, a birth certificate. It sits on a small table by the back door. The same threshold where I fell. The same ground where a seed took root. Not because of revenge, not even because of survival, but because I refuse to disappear. Every Wednesday, I volunteer at the community center down the street. We serve soup and coffee, and sometimes the older women bring homemade cookies in plastic tubs. No one there knows my past. They just know me as Beatrick, the one who always brings extra bread rolls and tiny paper packets of seeds. I don't tell them I was once erased from my own daughter's life, because now I'm part of something that doesn't require a camera. One man comes every week and brings me oranges from his own tree. Another woman told me she planted zinnias because I once said they're flowers that grow even when no one watches. Sometimes a college student writes to say, "Your story made me call my mom." I keep their letters in a drawer by the window, and every time I read them, I'm reminded, you don't have to be seen to matter. You don't need applause to take up space because a real mother, she doesn't vanish when she's written out. She lingers in the letters, in the lullabies, in the lives she held steady. And if you listen closely, you'll hear her in the rustling leaves whispering, "I was always there. I still am." If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of a love that still lives quietly in the background, then I hope you'll share it, like it, comment. Let someone know they're not invisible. Because sometimes when a grandma speaks quietly, truthfully, the world finally listens.